This is 10-year-old Asia Newsom. She made $16,000 last year selling her own candles, a Detroit businesswoman in the making. And she has this question.
I want to know who's going to be the voice for the children, because we're the future of this city, and it seems like no one is here to support us. Kids out here doing some very bad stuff, and we don't have any supports.
Mr. Napoleon, can you answer that?
I certainly can. I raised a young daughter in this city. I've seen what school can do and what college can do, and I'm a very proud father of a young lady who came up through the Detroit public school system, graduated from Bates Academy, graduated from Renaissance High School, and now has 2 degrees from the University of Michigan. I'm helping her raise my 6-year-old grandson in the city of Detroit, who's in a school in the city of Detroit. I have talked to youth throughout this community all my life. My nieces and nephews, scores of them, are still here in this community. They're raised. I listen to them. I listen to their voices all the time. I listen to the voices of their friends. We're going to have a table where we bring the young people together. I can create all kinds of things for young people to do, but that really won't matter. So we have to bring you in. Just this past weekend, I was hanging out with Mr. Nice Guy down at Burt's with a bunch of great young people as they were doing things like poetry. They were singing. They had dance. And I listened to them. And they told me unequivocally, we need more entertainment. We need to make this city more lively for young folks. And I'm listening to them. They're at the table with me every single day as I think about the future of the young people in this community.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Duck.
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's the most important thing that America do. When I was prosecutor, I visited schools every single week, talking to the young people what their aspirations were and what we could do to make them safer. I spent a number of years myself as a coach, and we have got to extend the opportunities for young people in sports and recreation in this city. And then when I got to the Detroit Medical Center, there was an enormous threat to young people. Hutzel Hospital was about to close, and at Hutzel we deliver 5,000 babies a year, hundreds of them, babies 2 pounds or less. They're babies you can literally hold in the palm of your hands when they're born. And it's amazing how many times we send those babies home healthy with their moms 3 or 4 months later. That hospital was going to close, and I don't know where those moms and those babies would have been. But in partnership with the 14,000 men and women at DMC, we turned that system around. We expanded the program, and those services at Hutzel and Children are still there today, and I'm going to keep fighting for kids every day after I'm the mayor of Detroit.
Mr. Napoleon.
Once again, I just want to piggyback. You know, I think that my long history, 13 years of my career in the Detroit Police Department was spent in areas that had kids as their primary focus. I've seen the devastation in our communities. I've helped with my sister ran a program called My Brother's Keeper out of Michigan State University, and we worked very closely with them throughout her tenure as a distinguished professor at Michigan State. I've been involved with the kids in this community my entire life.
I can't resist this from that young lady who put the question to you. Whichever one of you become the next mayor, will you agree to perhaps a town meeting here with that young lady being the co-moderator and have some of her friends?
That would be wonderful.
All right, very good.
There's something we're going to agree on.
I'm sorry?
Napoleon? We got that commitment from
Well, you know, Chuck, under normal circumstances, I would agree with you, but I do have other stations that would probably want to know that they had the same opportunity. So I'm not going to agree to that.
We aren't really worried about them tonight, are we?
I'm sure you are, but I'll agree to a town hall meeting with the kids.
Very good, very good, very good. We'll get our cameras in first. All right, Baker Lay Thompson, your question to Mr. Duggan.
Well, let's switch the pendulum to good governance, ethics, and government. The former mayor of Detroit is headed to prison for decades, and we've seen what has happened in the city in the last decade in terms of, you know, honesty in government, ethics, trust, and so forth. Can you tell us tonight, is there anything in your background that's problematic that may come up during the course of your administration that you want to disclose here this evening?
No. You know, I was made the deputy county executive when I was 28 years old, and everything I did, right or wrong, has been covered by the folks here in the media, and so everything out there is well known. But I do think it is critical that we establish a culture of integrity in the city of Detroit right from the beginning. And while I disagree with Mayor Bing on many things, I do believe he deserves credit for moving us in the right direction on the standards of integrity. But here's how you do it. You don't get to integrity by accident. And so we're going to put a compliance program in place where we have half-day training sessions for every single one of the 10,000 City of Detroit employees, saying these are the standards of ethics and this is the way we expect people to behave. Then we are going to provide hotlines, both on the internet and by telephone, that any employee can call to report anything that's gone wrong. And in addition, we're not just going to have it available to employees, we're also going to establish a hotline for the public so that members of the public can come in and also report the things that they're doing, because so many of the things that are gone wrong in the city, lots of people knew about, and nobody thought if they reported it, anybody would follow up. And then the key is we are going to set up an independent investigation team so that every complaint that comes in is independently investigated. When the employees and the public see that when these ethics breaches are addressed aggressively by the city leadership, we can squash the culture that we've had in the past, and we can rebuild a new culture of integrity for our future.
Sheriff Napoleon.
My life as a public servant has been examined since the time I was 19 years old. I have been in the law enforcement business. I've been in the put people in jail and prison business. I have absolutely no intention of going myself. My whole career has been centered around being transparent, being open, and being accessible. The fact is, it is very clear throughout my history, when folks stole drugs from the police department property room, I put them in prison. When people cheated on a promotional exam, people went to jail. When people were concerned about shootings in the public, I invited the feds in to take a look at those situations. Everyone who ever worked for me understands that if you do something wrong, you're going to prison, and I'll be the first one to put the cuffs on you and drive you to the jailhouse.
Mr. Duck.
No rebuttal.
All right, very good. Lloyd Jackson, your question to Mr. Napoleon.
Sheriff, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, approximately 58 million American adults experience a mental health disorder each year. 1 in 5 adults in Michigan will experience a mental health disorder at some point in their lives. With many of the crimes taking place in the city of Detroit being committed by those with some type of mental or emotional problem going untreated, as mayor, how will you deal with getting help for those in the city that are committing crimes but need some type of mental help?
You know, I've been working with Irva Bermudez from Detroit Central City Community Mental Health Agency since long before I was the sheriff. I represented people requiring treatment when I was practicing law in probate court. I understand the challenges that many people in this community have. Even today, in the jail that I operate, my commanders tell me that almost 70% of the people in that jail are people requiring treatment. We have a very serious issue with our mental health population. We're working hard very hard now to work with folks in the mental health provider industry to try to do something to ease the burden on those folks with mental health issues. I understand that very clearly. I've done it throughout the course of my adult life. I will be working very closely with the provider community and with everyone who will come to the table to try to do something about what is a very serious problem in the city of Detroit. We have a serious issue with the homeless. A lot of the people who are homeless on the streets of the city of Detroit are people requiring treatment. They belong to somebody, though. People have to care about what happens to these people. Oftentimes they're overlooked, and the real issue with mental health is a lot of people don't have family members. They've given up on them. We can't give up on our people. We have to care and take care of the least of these.
Mr. Duck.
Well, this is a great opportunity for the next mayor of Detroit, because there is a new health authority that's been formed, which has 12 board members, and the mayor of Detroit appoints 6 of these members. And it's something that's been neglected by the city for far too long. But as the mayor, I am going to make sure we have 6 dedicated people who want to actually improve the services for the mentally ill. And I will come back again to talking about what did you do? And when I was the prosecutor, we took this issue on head on because we didn't want to be locking people up who needed mental illness. So we set up a program where any defense attorney could come in and say, you know what, I have a client here who I think is mentally ill. We would get them immediately assessed, and if they were assessed as mentally ill, we would divert them to treatment. So we weren't just putting people into the criminal justice system who actually needed a different kind of care. That program has since fallen apart. But when I get in there next year, we're going to insist that the Mental Health Authority reinstate it, and we will get the services to the people who are causing the crimes and see if we can't get them diverted to a better approach.
Sheriff, your rebuttal.
No rebuttal.
No rebuttal at all. All right, very good. We have time to go back to the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, where Glenda Lewis is standing by. Glenda, your question to Mr. Duggan.
All right, we have a question from Beverly Smith. Your question, ma'am?
As Communications Director of the Detroit Black Chamber of Commerce, we advocate for minority business owners in a city that is over 80% African American. But as a woman, a black woman, mother, grandmother, and business owner, what will you do as mayor to engage the majority, not the minority, of Detroit residents?
Mr. Duggan, your response?
And I will continue to talk about not just what will I do, but what have I done. And I talked before about the fact that at the Detroit Medical Center, nearly half of all of the construction contracts going on today are going to women, minority, and Detroit-based businesses. And a huge factor in that was another African-American woman, Sharon Trevelyan, who owns a trucking firm and who has been a huge supporter of this campaign. She came in and brought in a group of minority suppliers, and they said, we can open up a whole lot more opportunities for women and minority businesses if you can pay on a 15-day cycle instead of a 30-day cycle, because we're just starting out and we need to be paid more often. We changed the entire process to do that, and we dramatically improved the participation. If you go back 10 years ago when I was co-chairing the Wayne County Stadium Authority, we did exactly the same thing. We went into the group then known as MMBDC and Charlie Beckham and sat down there and said, how can we make sure that every dollar we can legitimately spend in this community is done? And again, we achieved nearly half of all the work at Comerica Park and Ford Field. Building those stadiums in this community again went to small women, minority, and Detroit-based companies. That's been the history of every place I've been, and when we get into the city of Detroit, this is the only thing that makes sense. There are dollars. We want to spend them in our community, create jobs in our community, and create business wealth in our community, and we're going to continue to do what we've done in the past.
Sheriff Napoleon.
I agree that the only way you can judge that is by what someone's done in the past. And again, as I said on the $3 billion Detroit Police and Fire Pension Fund, when I came to the table, I looked at all of the people who were providing services to the Police and Fire Pension Fund, lawyers, money managers, real estate folks, people who were doing the work for that board. It was grossly disproportionate to the number of people in the reflecting the makeup of the city of Detroit. So what we did was we put in business the largest African-American owned real estate investment firm in this country. We helped create money managers who are now managing millions and millions and billions of dollars in this country, like Ariel Capital out of Chicago. We've done a lot like with Paradigm, brokers, lawyers. So again, I've done that my entire career. We need to focus on Detroit. If you can buy it in Detroit, it should be bought in Detroit. If you can't get it in Detroit, it should be done in Wayne County. If you can't get it in Wayne County, it should be the state of Michigan.
All right. Eric.
And it's important that while we want to use the city spending wisely, we can also influence our largest employers. So, for example, when I was at the Detroit Medical Center, we partnered with Henry Ford Hospital and Wayne State University, and we looked at all the vendors we were using in the city of Detroit. One of us might have used a Detroit bakery. One of us might have used a Detroit computer company. We shared those lists with each other, and we worked together and dramatically increased the purchasing from our own community. We need to get the Detroit businesses here to spend their money here, and I think we can do that.
Thank you. We'll go back to our panel now. Carolyn, your question to Mr. Napoleon.
Mr. Napoleon, okay, you've heard me say this before. Kevin Orr, our emergency manager right on Channel 7, said without bankruptcy, Detroit will die. He's basically said to the pensioners who are depending on this lifeline, he didn't create the problem, he didn't spend the money, too bad, basically. What will you do specifically to help people who are depending on their pensions and health care that may be cut if we go through with this bankruptcy? Will you go to Washington? Will you ask for a bailout? I talked to a woman not long ago who sat with me in the hospital. She said, I'm a retired woman from the Detroit Police Department. I'm living on disability. If they cut my pension, I will lose my home.
You know, Carolyn, this is very personal to me. I commanded an agency where people put their lives on the line for this community every single day. And when I hear someone like Kevin Orr discuss that in such a callous and indifferent way, he doesn't understand the perspective and the lens that I see this through. I've taken the flags off of coffins of deceased police officers far too many times. I think about Diane Philpott and her little daughter, Caitlin, and the father and husband to them, Jerry Philpott, who lost his life in an alley in Southwest Detroit. She's now living off his pension and medical care. To say to her that the loss of Jerry Philpott's life was in vain and that you're going to leave his widow and his child without a pension and without medical care is unconscionable. But I also think about my friend Darrell Williams, who was shot attempting to take down a carjacker up on Finkel Avenue. He now has his legs amputated on a colostomy bag and has a serious head wound. And for someone to suggest at any point in time that folks are not entitled to their pensions after the sacrifices that they made, but even those who survived in the Detroit Police Department, like myself, what about the countless hours that I spent protecting this community, walking into places never knowing when I was going to walk out? I will stand with you until the day I die, and every ounce of blood that I have in me, I'm willing to spend to keep Kevin Orr from doing that.